Welcome, I'm Martina, your trusty guide through the pages of Camp Half-Blood and beyond. Grab your camp shirts, ready your weapons, and let's embark on this epic adventure together. This is Delphi Dispatches. Today, we'll have a Season 1 recap and review. Next week, we will have some Season 2 theories and thoughts up front. Then, like I said last week, I will take a break until April, so I will be coming back on the 1st of April. Don't worry, I'm not creative enough to think of a clever April Fool's joke. And from then on, we will continue bi-weekly, and I'm looking forward to covering other things. We will probably start with the movie and the musical, and then we will dive into Book 1. But before all that, we will have the promised Q&A, so you can still send in questions until about the middle of March. You can send them in either on Instagram as a DM, or I will also post some stories where you can just fill out the question sticker. You can also send an email to delphidispatches@gmail.com, or use the Q&A poll under Spotify or the comments on YouTube. Now let's start with the Delphi Dispatches. On the 6th of February, there was a new Rick Riordan Presents book released. It's called Winston Chu vs. the Wingmeisters by Stacey Lee, and it's the first of 2 books in the Winston Chu vs. the Whimsy series. I'm just gonna read you the little blurb from Rick Riordan. They say it's a modern-day, middle-grade reimagining of a classic Chinese folk tale, replete with magic, boba tea, and lots of trash-talking. By Stacey Lee, award-winning author and founding member of We Need Diverse Books. It sounds intriguing. I'm looking forward when I'm one day covering the RRP books and reading those. Sometime in the last week, I think, the Percy Jackson Instagram account reached 1 million followers, so yay, more Percy Jackson fans. On the 7th of February, Leah went live after the announcement of the 2nd season, and she's just the sweetest human ever, you know? She was wearing her Annabeth necklace, and she talked about how she found out about the renewal, because it was like she was during class and she still picked up her phone. She also showed us the things she took from set or got from set, like the necklace. Then she has 2 shields and Annabeth's jacket, which she grew out of. She tried it on live and she was like, oh no, I grew out of it. Yeah, and she talked about generally a lot of fun stuff about filming and how she started acting. It's just really nice and really sweet, and she's just super cute, and the live stream is available as a video on her Instagram page if you want to check it out. It's like, I think, 20 minutes. On the 10th of February, there was a PGO panel at the TCA Winter Press Tour where the showrunners and our trio went. There we found out a lot of different things. I'm just highlighting a few of them because there was no live stream, so we couldn't get the information firsthand. We had to rely on press tweeting about it, so I'm relying on them. So Percy Jackson streamed over 110 million hours during the 1st season, so that's a lot. The showrunners also said they definitely want to introduce more Olympians in further seasons, of course, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, is there any god we meet in Season 2? Like any new god? Because we would have met Hermes there the first time, but we met him already. So we're gonna see Ares again, we're gonna see Hermes again. Are those the only 2 gods? And Dionysus, Mr. D. Those the only gods we meet? Well, maybe we will meet some other gods, like written into earlier. They also said they were not thinking yet of any recasting of Zeus, and of course they don't have to, because book-wise, Zeus doesn't physically show up again until book 3, so they have time. And the funniest thing we found out is that Arian's dad keeps sending him edits of Grover in a wedding dress. I just love it, and I can't wait to see it in real life. Now some social media highlights. We got a few new videos on the Percy Jackson channel. One of them being how to be a demigod, and it's like kind of a joke. Because the first thing Percy does is throwing away the Demigod survival guide. And there's only really one lesson he tells you. It was lesson 1, how to steal from the gods. The answer is don't. I can agree. And then there was like a list that went through really quick that had like a lot of points. Then we also had like pictures and videos about the season 2 announcement celebration of the trio. They got some cake and they shoved the cake in each other's faces. They just did a little bit with Walker and they put Leah's freaking head into the cake. It looked like she was almost suffocating while laughing, while covered in blue icing. Poor girl. We also got a lot of different behind-the-scenes pictures from the show, which, I mean, all pictures and behind-the-scenes stuff we get is just precious, so, I'm gonna say that again and again and again. Then we got another video which I was not expecting. It was a Demigod Diaries Season 1 recap. I mean, many of these things they showed there we saw in other behind-the-scenes videos or in the documentary. So it was not a lot of new things, but it was still good seeing it cut together like that. The social media accounts of Percy Jackson are making fan edits. You're on Percy Jackson on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You see a lot of fan edits because apparently Percy Jackson has reignited the fan edits era. And for now, as of this recording, I've only seen one for Grover and Annabeth from the official Percy Jackson account, but they're really good and they're really fun. Then we have a few news from Rick on Threads. Since I still do not have Threads, I rely on people reposting it on Instagram, so thank you to those people. The first one was about the first day in the writer's room, that it was good, and they already had a few scripts before the season 2 was renewed because they started writing stuff before the strike. And he also says that the scripts are in excellent shape and they're looking forward to having more Luke, Clarice, and Mr. D in season 2, and of course Tyson. We can't wait for Tyson. There was another post regarding what we can expect timeline-wise from when the season 2 will air, and he said we should take an example from season 1, and he posted the timeline. I think it's also on his blog, so yeah. Season 1 got greenlit in January 2022, and season 2 in January 2024. So from these one based, I will just compare them based on the year. It's just plus 2 years for everything. The Percy casting announcement was in April 2022, so major announcement, maybe Tyson announcement in April 2024, and in May 2022 we got a full casting announcement. I don't know, maybe the Tyson announcement will be in May 2024 or other casting announcements, like what new characters do we have? We have Tantalus. I hope we get a lot of new campers, like Beckendorf, Selena, the Stoles, people like that, and also Thalia, of course. But I will probably do a fan casting and prediction stuff in next episode. Then they started filming in June of 2022, so maybe they will start filming in June of 2024, or even earlier. I would be happy if it's earlier. And they wrapped up filming in February 2023, so February 2025 wrap up? ? And then post-production started in March, and the release of season 1 was in December 2023, so maybe season 2 will air in December 2025? I mean, all of us are hoping for an earlier release and an already greenlit season 3 by then, so just cross your fingers, pray to the gods, and stream Percy Jackson, I guess. And in another, this was not on Threads, it was a reply on Goodreads, I think. Rick says that Reyna will be in season 2 in the same way that Nico was in season 1 in the Lotus Casino. So, as a Reyna stan, I'm very happy about this. So I will look out for Reyna with hawk eyes. Then, let's move on to the awards. There was one award ceremony since the last episode was recorded, and this was the Directors Guild of America Awards, and there James Bobbin was nominated for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Children's Programs for Percy Jackson Episode 1, and unfortunately they did not win, but I looked at the competition and it was like really hard. I don't remember who won, but I'm like, yeah, that's hard competition. And lastly, for the news part, we have the Rotten Tomatoes score. The tomato meter average is at 92%, and we're still certified fresh, with 55 fresh reviews and 5 rotten ones. The average audience score is at 80% with 4.2 stars from over 2,500 reviews. Now it's time for the Demigod Discussions of this episode, and it's a lot because we're doing a Season 1 recap. Some general facts up front. Season 1 had 8 episodes with a total runtime of 317 minutes, which is 5 hours and 17 minutes. And I watched the show, like normally, 6 times. Like every episode I watched 6 times. And I also watched it additional 8 times through reactors on YouTube. So I have seen a lot of the show, and I still love it. But it's also a reason why I'm taking a break. I need some other media to consume right now. So here's my spoiler warning for the whole first season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians and the first book. And there will be some spoilers for the whole series at the end, but I will give a separate spoiler warning for that. Let's start out with episode 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. In one of my previous episodes, I talked about every episode having a different theme. I took some notes, and on one of my many rewatches, I associated change with the first episode. Not only change as in Percy going from school to school, but also change in his behavior and also change in his environment, coming from school back home, then immediately going from home to Montauk, and that not even lasting a night, and immediately going to camp. Another change was, of course, his mother being ripped away from him, and some more change, his best friend betrayed him. That's kind of a change. And the last change was, I have it written down here, oh yeah, he has a new teacher. So Mrs. Dodds is away, which means that's also a change. And if we would compare it to the book, this episode encompasses chapters 1 through 4. I'm gonna start off with some general things I picked up or liked or didn't talk about in the episode dedicated to this episode. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you'll see. And then I have my favorite quotes, and that's how we will continue with the other episodes as well. So, about the opening shot. Even though you might think this scene would later have more relevance, you get to know that this is the beach where his parents met, and also one of the first times, if not even the first time, Percy sees Kronos in one of his dreams. And at the end, of course, it's also the place where he fights Ares on the beach. So I think it's a good point to start out the season. Next thing was, I adore baby Percy. Asriel Dahlman he's just too cute and he's perfect. Even though in a few shots they either forgot to put the contacts in or didn't want to, I don't know. And he still has brown eyes, but minor details, there are worse things that could happen. But speaking of baby Percy, the school uniform he's wearing in episode 1, the green one, it's like green and has a logo of a tree on it, which gave me major Magnus Chase vibes. We know that Camp Half-Blood t-shirts are orange. We know that Camp Jupiter t-shirts are purple. And a lot of Hotel Valhalla t-shirts or merch is always depicted in being green. I don't remember if it's canonically in the book, but it probably is. And since Magnus Chase is about Norse mythology, they also have the world tree. So the tree on the logo. So maybe it's just a little Easter egg I didn't pick up on the first time, but I don't remember seeing anyone talk about it online. Maybe. Then we're in the Met. And behind Percy there is the statue that looks like the same one in like the middle of the training grounds in Camp Half-Blood. I think it's Hercules with someone. Then outside at the fountain, Grover mentions Mr. Kane to Percy to make an appointment. So it's probably like the school psychiatrist or guidance counselor. I also think it's like an allusion to the Kane Chronicles, because we know that one of the Kane brothers lives in New York, so maybe he's a teacher part-time, but I don't remember if I've talked about this in my analysis of episode 1. And I also really like the changes they made so that monsters can talk to demigods in their minds, even from a distance. Like Electo is doing with Percy in front of the Met, and Echidna is doing with Annabeth at the St. Louis Arch. Then, when Grover betrays Percy, it's just a face of pure betrayal when Grover rats Percy out at the principal's office, and it's just heartbreaking every time when he says like, Grover? It's so sad. Then, before Percy comes home, is when Mr. Brunner tells him he's seen a lot of kids go through what Percy is going through. In that moment, he's not speaking as Mr. Brunner, but as Chiron, which means that Percy had it worse, or is going to have it worse, than other great heroes before him, because Chiron trained a lot of those heroes. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, Achilles, but I know Chiron trained many other heroes, I think Asclepius and Jason. I think also Hercules. Then, when we come home, we see Gabe is messy. No surprise there. But it seems like it's only the places where Gabe lives, in quotation marks, because it's just like the living room and the adjacent kitchen area where he could reach from his chair, so he doesn't have to get up. Because everywhere else it looks clean, because it's like Sally's domain, and she's like, you're not leaving your trash there. Speaking of Sally, when she's sitting in the rain, it could be to talk to Poseidon, and the music is going so no one else could hear them. Or, of course, it's just a connection with Poseidon, since she just found out her son got expelled again. Yeah, on the train of Sally and Poseidon, I noticed that in episode 1, Sally is wearing a necklace with just one pearl on it, and Poseidon is also wearing a necklace with one, I think also it's a pearl on it. So is that like a gift they gave each other one time, or just pure coincidence? Then we're at the cabin, and there I noticed that there is no radio, where there is a radio in episode 8. So either someone put a radio up in the meantime, or they just forgot it. I love how they still manage to bring in some of the humorous stuff from the books, especially when Grover comes to the cabin and he's like, no need to panic, everything's under control. And then for the Minotaur fight, I'm just thinking of poor Walker having to be drenched in this wool sweater while filming all this stuff. I'm not the hugest fan of wool sweaters in general, but wet wool sweaters? Oh no. Now, my favorite quotes of this episode were, it was Percy to us, of course, the opening. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you think you might be one of us, my advice is turn away while you still can, because once you know what you are, they'll sense it too, and they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. Just pure book adaptation perfection. I'm very happy about it. Then we have Sally to small Percy in the mat. The thing I'm maybe getting a tattoo of if I ever decide to get one. Hold fast, Perseus. Brave the storm that was meant to break us, for we are unbreakable as long as we have each other. The next one is from Percy to Sally in the cabin. You fell in love with God? Like Jesus? Oh, I love it. It's great. The next one is also from Percy to Sally, and it's like after she told him he's a half-blood. No, this is crazy, okay? I'm not a god. There's something wrong with my brain. I understand that I'm weird, believe me, I get it. But I'm afraid something may be really broken now. So sad. But to lighten the mood, I have a fun one next. It's from Percy to Grover. Why is there half a goat in your pants? And Grover to Sally, and I think also to himself. The important thing is not to panic. And the last quote of this episode was from Sally to Percy before the Minotaur fight. Perseus, listen to me. You are not broken. You are singular. You're a miracle. And you are my son. Hold fast. Brave the storm. I love you. No, don't cry. Don't cry. It's so sweet. Let's move on to episode 2. I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. And this episode's theme, I think, is belonging. So Percy finds out where he's supposed to belong, first in camp, and then as the son of Poseidon. And those would be chapters 5 to 8 in the book. The first question about camp I have is, do they have electricity? Because in the big house veranda and like everywhere else, there are just candles and like vases with fire. I've never seen like any electric light bulbs. I mean, I think they have to have some sort of electricity for the bathrooms to work. Oh yeah, and speaking of the candles I saw, they look like they're made out of like real raw beeswax. So I would be interested if that's like a camp activity, making candles, because I would be very interested in that. I also love how Percy can shift from the pure sassiness we know to "excuse me, your highness." It's one of the funniest things I've seen so far. I also love how Dionysus is just gaslighting Percy. He's probably doing that with all the new campers. Some may take it, others won't. But I'm thinking, if they actually bring him alcohol, will Zeus strike one of those? Will the wine or whatever they brought him just turn to water like in the books? Probably like the one in the books. At the entrance of the big house veranda, when Chiron comes in, there are grapes in some sort of vase. And that's probably symbolizing that Mr. D, aka Dionysus, the god of wine, lives there. Yeah, it's one of those things I've never realized until like one of my last few rewatches. I'm also wondering, why doesn't Chiron want Grover to come along on the tour of the camp for Percy? Speaking of camp, as always, it just looks gorgeous and great. Let's moving on to the wood nymph. I just love the design of Helena and it looks just amazing. And there's also this time where she looks at Grover's horns and says that he's been picking at them again because he was nervous, which is kind of a, what do you call it, foreshadowing to episode 7, when he does the same thing at the entrance of the underworld and Annabeth knows this behavior because they're friends and she gives him the stress ball. It's so cute. And what I want is the next scene, because the next scene was probably cut all together. It's the Council of Cloven Elders, because we know they filmed it because Arian talked about it. Maybe we will get it in like another behind the scenes stuff or some bloopers or something. I would really like to see it because Arian, I think, said the council was just bleating and he was talking normal, and I love it. Next is fire. We know that the fire in episode 4 on the arch was partially real, and I also want to know if the fire on the arrow in camp was real. And speaking of fire, every time I see Percy making a burnt offering of blue jelly beans to Sally, I get teary-eyed because it's just so sweet. And he does this grand gesture of god worship to worship his mom. I just love it so much. Speaking of things I love, it's Annabeth's bluntness in the first few episodes and the way she gains her humanity and social life back throughout the season. I also like the general change that we switched the terminology from child of the big three to forbidden kid, because it's just way shorter and way easier to say. Next up is when Karen says that the games begin and they show the red team screaming and cheering. There's this one little guy who's like probably 8 or 9. He's just a small blonde kid and he has this huge axe in his hand. He's lifting it up and screaming from the bottom of his lungs, and it's just the cutest little thing ever. But it's also freaking scary having like this small kid with an axe looking at you. The next thing, I've said it multiple times, but I'm just gonna say it again. Throughout this whole series, Leah's eyebrow acting is on point. I love it. We need a Oscar category of best eyebrow acting. I think I said that once, but still. Then, during the capture the flag scene, Luke is talking to Chris and he says Percy is on it when he's speaking of Annabeth's plan. And he says when it's time he's gonna be ready, I know it. This could not only be interpreted as for this instance, but also in like the overall plot when Luke tries to recruit Percy in the last episode, and this is like hints that Chris maybe already know what Luke's plans are, which is probable, and I think Chris is one of Luke's accomplices already. During the fight with Clarice and her siblings, you can see Walker himself is actually good at fighting, but he has to act like Percy is not good at fighting yet, because he isn't. And at some point you see he's actually better than he is supposed to be, especially at the end. I mean, yeah, he's near water, so he defeats Clarice, but actually it's more an accident, so you don't really know what you can attribute to Percy during this fight. When Percy gets claimed, you can really see how uneasy Chris and Luke get when they now know that Percy is a kid of the big three, and that's not very good for their plan. And we also know that Percy is a mama's boy. I mean, we knew that already, but we see it in the last scene of this episode. And also we get to know that Grover has perfect timing superpowers, because he comes in at the right time. Now, quotes. The first one is, of course, from Annabeth to Percy in the infirmary bed. You drool when you sleep. Then we have Mr. D, after Percy introduces himself. Peter Johnson is here. Then also Mr. D to Chiron. Why must you ruin everything? Then we also have Grover to Chiron and Mr. D after he finds out about Sally. I've never seen a Minotaur crush a human to death, but I just assumed they'd get really squishy or something, or like an old banana maybe? Perfect comparison. Humans and bananas. Then we have one of Luke to Percy, after explaining that everyone has nightmares, ADHD, and dyslexia and stuff. Demigods just process reality differently than humans do. For the first time in your life, you're just like everyone else. The next one is also from Luke, when he's explaining glory. It's like the stuff that attaches itself to your name. Makes it bigger, scarier, more important. People listen closer when you talk. They work harder to be your friend, and they think twice about messing with you. Next one is Percy while making an offering to Sally. I mean, ignoring me is one thing, but he doesn't get to ignore you. I'm gonna make him come down here. I'm gonna make him see me. I'm gonna make him see us both. Then we have Clarice to Percy during the capture the flag fight. Glory's fine. Revenge is more fun. The next one is Chiron after Percy gets claimed. You have been claimed by Poseidon, Earthshaker, Stormbringer, Father of Horses, Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. As a forbidden child of the sea god, you are singular amongst demigods. And the last quote I have for this episode is Percy to Mr. D. I am Sally Jackson's son. She's the one who cared enough to call herself my mother. She's the one who got herself killed so that I could be safe here. Let's move on to episode 3. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. The theme here is monsters or monstrosity, as in not everyone who looks like a monster is a monster. I mean, best example, Medusa. But if we take the whole season into account, Alecto as well. I mean, she was very nice to them, but in the end, she had a job to do. And this episode would correlate with chapters 9 through 12. I love the lighting choice they made for the Oracle. She's sitting in a beam of sunlight, and since Apollo is both the god of the sun and the god of prophecy, it's just a great combination. Next one is Grover. I just love Grover just casually talking with the Pegasus. Like, dude, what have you been eating? And stuff. Next thing is when Luke gives Percy the shoes. The way Luke looks at the shoes and sighs before he says Maya is really sad. He's probably thinking of the curse that lies on them, and that in a few days they would drag this little kid to the bottom of Tartarus. When Grover tells Percy about Thalia's fate, we find out that at the last moment Zeus intervened to change Thalia's form, foreshadowing actually what happens in episode 8 on Olympus, when Poseidon intervenes at the last moment to save his son in a much better way than turning him into a plant. Then we're on the bus, and the consensus song is It's Still a Banger. Also, Grover said that it is a consensus song, which implies that there are others, and I need all of them now. Please and thank you. Or at least verse 2 of this one. And yes, we're still on the bus, and when they try to escape, I'm still thinking of how easy was it to push out the window of the bus. Because I suppose it should not be that easy. When we're at Medusa's and we see the first few statues, the one that has like bat-like wings, that looks actually really cool turned into stone. I don't know why I like it, I just like it. Speaking of Medusa's, I love that Annabeth is smart and immediately clocks that they are at Medusa's, unlike in the books where they're like, oh, what could this place be? Then when we're inside the house of Medusa, my biggest question from that episode analysis still stands. How fast did she make all this food, or was it just sitting around? Next, there's this bell that rings when Medusa asks if they know her story. What does this symbolize? It could be them running out of time, times changing. If you have any other ideas, please let me know. Also, the fact that Medusa sits far away from the trio and not like with them at the table symbolizes her isolation and the distance she has to keep from other people. And her backstory is just as heartbreaking as ever, and I love how they adapted and changed it for this and as opposed to the version from the book. And also in this episode, Annabeth is starting to get a glimpse that the gods, and especially her mother, are not all that great. When Percy uses Medusa's head to turn Electra into stone, he stands like the Perseus statue in the mat for a few seconds, but he changes it himself quickly because he's probably realizing that as well. And the last one for this is that Grover is literally a 24-year-old having to deal with 12-year-olds. Why do kids have to be so annoying? Now let's look at the quotes. I mean, of course, the whole prophecy. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you friend, and you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. And then we have Percy to Chiron, when he explains himself why he chose Annabeth for the quest. If the mission required someone to push me down a flight of stairs to succeed, you'd want someone who won't hesitate when they do it. So Annabeth is perfect. Then we have Percy to Grover on why he chose him. I trust you, and right now there's nothing more important than that. Then the next one is Percy about Thalia. She met a pinecone's fate. We also have Annabeth arguing with Percy about Grover, saying, he was my protector first. And then I have a lot of quotes from Medusa. We all choose who we make our monsters. I'm a survivor. Then the next one is to Annabeth. I wasn't like you, sweetheart. I was you. Then there's one to Percy and Annabeth. We are not our parents until we choose to be. The next one is from Grover to Percy and Annabeth. Maybe things need to get a little upsetting before they move forward. And the next thing is Percy about the quest. I chose her because I couldn't imagine we'd ever be friends. And I chose you because if I could count on anybody to be on my side, no matter what, it was you. And now I'm feeling so alone. I don't know what to think or who to trust. And the last one, to lighten the mood again, is Percy to Grover and Annabeth. I am impertinent. Yes, Percy. Yes, you are. Episode 4. I plunge to my death. Here the theme is parenting. I mean, the bookends are Sally's style of parenting and Poseidon's style of parenting, and we have a lot of echidna parenting in the middle. This episode encompasses chapters 13 and 14. When we start out in the swimming class, is that the New York skyline in the background? Probably. And is that the Empire State Building? Because I'm not very familiar with the New York skyline, but I think it's the Empire State Building, and it's like the gods are watching over Percy. Next, we're still in the dream. The desert where Percy meets Kronos should symbolize the underworld by the entrance of Tartarus, right? But why is there a normal sky? Is it just because Percy doesn't know that there's no normal sky there? His mind can't fabricate that yet? I don't know. Then when he wakes up and talks to Annabeth, I was wondering if these are sheep or cotton flowers on Annabeth's bonnet. Because if it's sheep, it's a sneaky little detail foreshadowing for season 2. We also see that when Annabeth talks about her father, she plays with his college ring on her necklace. I also would have liked to see what Echidna looks like when she slams into the train, because in the footage it just looks like a burning flying blob. Maybe she just looks like a burning flying blob in her monstrous physique. Then, the Centras. Are they different than the party ponies, or are those just like party ponies on a day off or something? Another great thing from this season is the way they put in all the Pan lore, so we know what Grover is off to next season. But back to Echidna. She's so freaking scary, and she doesn't even have to look scary to creep me out. I think Echidna looks so scary and incomprehensible for human minds that we see what the kids see in this scene. So Echidna has been humanified for the demigod's eyes through the mist. Or Echidna chose to look this way because essentially she's also kind of a goddess, so she can look however she wants. On the arch, Annabeth tries to be the Thalia in the moment, but Percy ends up doing the same thing that Thalia did to the two, sacrificing himself so they can get to safety. The sound that the chimera makes sounds like a mix of a lion's roar and a screaming goat, and some hissing of a snake, so even the sound is like mixed of these animals, which is really cool. When Percy falls out of the arch and you have like this wide shot of the arch, there's a cloud in the background that looks like Mickey ears, so hidden Mickey confirmed. I also like that now that we've seen the documentary of the making of Percy Jackson, it's even more impressive how they did the underwater scenes. Now for my favorite quotes from this episode. The first one is baby Percy to Sally. Breathe, mommy. Just breathe. Then we have Percy about the gods. It isn't supposed to work that way. People who are close to you aren't supposed to treat you that way. Then we have Annabeth replying to Percy. It isn't the gods that think that way. It's everybody. But at least with the gods you know the rules. Show them respect, and they'll be in your corner no matter what. Next thing is Grover about Pan and humans. A few thousand years ago, the god of the wild, Pan, disappeared, and ever since, without Pan to protect the natural world, humans have been trying really hard to chip away at it. Next thing is Echidna to the trio. Monster. That is an odd word, considering my grandmother is your great-grandmother, and this has always been a family story. But, to my eyes, Demigod is the more dangerous creature. Disruptive, violent. If I exist for anything, it is to stand in the way of monsters like you. Then we're in the arch, and Percy is talking to Annabeth about Poseidon. I don't want anything from him. He's had his chance. Honestly, you've done more for me in the past few days than my father has done for me my entire life. Then we have Percy to Annabeth and Grover when he is actively sacrificing himself. Poseidon's never helped me before. He wasn't gonna start now. I would have never made it to Hades, but you can, and now you will. And also, the last things Echidna says to Percy. So unfair. You never had a chance, did you? If only someone had cared enough for you to provide you with one. And the last quote of this episode I really liked is the Nerea to Percy. Just breathe. Your father is here. He's always been here. It is so hard for him to stand back, to see you struggle. It is so hard for us all. But he is here, and he's so very proud. Trust him. Trust yourself. Just breathe. Episode 5. A god buys us cheeseburgers. In this episode, the theme is family. We have a lot of dysfunctional families in this case, not a lot of working families. And this episode just encompasses chapter 15. Let's start out with the fates. I think they're great. I only wish they would have increased the sound of the snipping of the yarn, like it's described in the books. Because in the books I think it's like heard over 4 lanes of traffic. Yeah, that's my only nitpick about that. I love that Grover is so polite when Ares shows up. And when they're like looking over the barrier, they're so cute. Then when we're at the diner, and Ares is talking about getting them to LA. I mean, Ares thinking he can get the kids to LA by lunch the next day shows he has no idea about traveling/distance in the human world, because he as a god can just appear wherever he wants. It would probably take a whole day from where they are to get to Las Vegas. And even if they would have gotten the cab from Hermes immediately, they would have not gotten to LA in under 24 hours. When Annabeth says she has never seen a movie, I was immediately thinking, okay, what movie do we show her? My proposition is How to Train Your Dragon. I have a feeling she would like those. Some things about the Grover and Ares interrogation scene. Throughout this whole scene, it is now clear to me that Grover is using his empathy powers to gauge how Ares is feeling and into what direction to steer him next to get the information he wants. Then Grover also mentions a quick and easy turn of power when he talks to Ares in the diner. This is basically what happened on the beach with the fight with Ares and Percy. It doesn't drag on forever. Ares makes one mistake, throwing Percy into the water, and it bites him in the butt almost immediately. Then back at Waterland, I love the visualization of Hephaestus' story. And up to now, Percy has never really been consciously controlling his powers. They always just respond when he has strong feelings. Here, he would be okay in the water by himself, but as he sees that Annabeth is not, his powers respond accordingly and save them both, basically. Yeah, and the whole throne scene in general always just makes me sad. And I also like that Annabeth is just ready to fight Hephaestus when she stands up. She has already got her dagger in hand and looks very angry. So she would fight a god to save Percy. In the end, Hephaestus shows with his actions that these immortal, unchangeable beings can actually change. Now for the quotes. The first one is from Grover to Percy. You're not as dead as we thought you'd be. Then we have Percy to Annabeth. It doesn't have to be a thing, you know, that you hugged me. I mean, we're like friends now. That seems like a thing friends do. At least I think they do. And we have Aries to the kids. Olympians fight. We betray. We backstab. We will push anyone down a flight of stairs to get ahead. Speaking of Aries, the next one is Aries to Grover. Satyrs eat tofu. Satyrs worship flowers. Satyrs sing songs about their feelings. Satyrs are not fans of mine. The next one is Percy about the song In the Tunnel of Love. Feel like I've heard this before. I think from an orthodontist's office, maybe? We're back with Aries when he's talking about Athena. And we're so sure she's the genius, and I, no owl, am not. Then we have Annabeth to Hephaestus. It's just her freaking monologue that gets me every time. It isn't how it should be. It isn't. Eat or be eaten. Power and glory and nothing else matters. Ares is that way. Zeus is that way. My mother is that way. He isn't that way. He's better than that. Maybe I was that way once, but I don't want to be that way anymore. I won't be like all of you. I just won't. And then Hephaestus replies to Annabeth, some of us don't like being that way either. You're a good kid, Annabeth. Then we have Percy to Aries. We're not gonna fail, and I'm getting pretty tired of you saying it. You think you know who I am, but you don't. And if you aren't careful, you're gonna find out. And the last one, Grover to Aries, perfect. So thank you for the emotional abuse and the cheeseburgers and the ride. We're gonna take you up on that too. Okay, episode 6. We take a zebra to Vegas. The theme here is distance. We have the physical distance of traveling with the truck from wherever they were before to Las Vegas, and then the distance from Las Vegas to LA, which they overcome immediately. But also the emotional distance between Luke and his father. And then we also overcome distances with the iris message, and also the time Hermes kind of moves them through space and time. That's also overcoming distance. So, I'm still confused, as always, on the mechanics of iris messages. I was before the show, I will be after the show, but still. It's just one thing I'm like, okay, but how? And how does it look when someone calls you? And all these things. And here, Luke is quite sus. I mean, now I can finally talk about it because, I knew how it was gonna end, but I didn't want to spoil too much. He is quite sus. And I think Annabeth is starting to suspect something is fishy as well about him. And I just love how amazed Grover is with these animals and that their safety is more important to him than the safety of the people in Las Vegas. Fair enough. Another thing, graphic novels count as reading. It's a book, you're reading it. Maybe there are more pictures than in other books. Still, it's a book. Then when Annabeth tells Percy about Luke's mom being a seer and what that means, he looks kind of shocked. Maybe he's thinking that Sally might also be a seer since she saw the Minotaur and knew a lot of things about the mythical world. There's also the slight look of panic in Grover's expression when Augustus mentions Pan. Get it? Panic. Pan. Back with Hermes, we have this instant tonal shift in Hermes, the music fading in, the background noise fading out, when they tell him that they're friends of Luke's. It's just, mwah, chef's kiss. When Hermes shows Percy the vision, he realizes something. Hermes said that it is hard to be close to someone and all you can do is keep hurting each other. That was Percy and Sally in that moment, and after we find out the full context of this flashback in episode 7, we know Percy realized in this moment that his mom was just trying to protect him and not get rid of him. When Percy tells Hermes that he was supposed to see Poseidon in Santa Monica, I think this stirred something inside Hermes, and this is the only reason he kind of let the kids go away from the casino and use his cab. Then we have confused/forgetful Grover, and he's just so precious. That poor guy. When Annabeth tells us the information that's inside the envelope, she mentions a backdoor to the underworld, a magic word, and a map in the glove box. I don't know what the magic word was for, but the rest is clearly the reason they knew to go to Krusty's in episode 7. The biggest change from the books being the solstice passing is actually really good and shows Percy's motivation better. I'm also curious if it is the same Nereid as in the Mississippi, because the one in the river looked more like a jellyfish, and the one in Santa Monica looked more like seagrass. But we didn't see the one in the river that close, so maybe it's still the same. And the last thing is Percy talking underwater is still so astonishing to me. Like, Walker did an amazing job here. Now to the quotes. The first one is Percy to Luke. Not to change the subject, but I have to say, I've used this in my daily life since and everyone loves it. Then we have a few things from Percy to Annabeth. The first one is, sometimes it might be okay to just let the easy ones go. The next one is, yeah, but if you don't know, what chance do I have? The next one is also Percy, but this time it's to Hermes. Wow, you're a really good guesser. And Hermes, I think that's actually just a reply to that, is, I exist beyond space and time, kid. Why do you think they'd put me in charge of delivering the mail? Then we have another thing from Hermes to Perciveth. Do you know what that feels like? To be so close to someone you love, knowing neither of you has any chance but to keep hurting each other. Then a bit later, Hermes says to Percy, it is very hard for a god to feel powerless. The next one is also one of my favorites. It's Annabeth to Percy. I'm multi-talented. Yes, girl, you are. Then at the beach, when Annabeth is talking to Grover about forgetting, we weren't alone. It's easy to forget what's important when you're alone. And the last two are from the Nereid to Percy. First one is, what belongs to the sea can always return. And the last one, the best of all, save the world, and then go save your mother. Next up, episode 7, we find out the truth. Sort of. With the theme of revelations. Yeah, of course, finding out the truth is a lot of revelations. And these would be chapters 17 to 19. Let's start out with Krusty. It is so weird that this old dude is Percy's brother. I have a big age gap between me and my siblings, but it's not that big. And I also hate the way that Krusty slapped that waterbed. And also one thing I noticed, it seems like no one is talking about the fact that there are blades coming out of the headboard of the waterbed that Krusty was bound to. Am I misinterpreting that, or why is no one talking about that? Then we have Annabeth giving Grover the stress ball. It's just friendship goals. I love it. Now for the first flashback. I hate those people that are saying Sally is a terrible mom just because of the first few flashbacks in this episode. She is a single parent to a demigod child of one of the big 3 gods. Due to these circumstances, their life is even harder when monsters start to show up. Now, could she have not yelled at Percy? Yes, but he needs to know that this is serious and she could have been much worse. There are so many demigods that run away from home or lose their immortal parent due to being a demigod. So back off of Sally Jackson because she is the greatest mother of them all. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Karen could still be the Italian suit-wearing guy from the books. Because in the books, they enter through the main underworld entrance in DOA records and take the boat across the river Styx. On that journey, Karen transforms from the handsome man into a hooded skeleton-esque figure. Since in the series they took the hidden entrance and skipped right to the end of that journey, Karen is already in his full underworld form. Maybe we just didn't get to see him. Maybe we'll get to see him in that outfit another time. Here's a little gripe I have. We know that the Cerberus CGI looks good, so why would they cover it up with so much fog? Just to have the amount of fog and I'm okay with it. I love the new lore we get about Asphodel, and one thing a lot of people are questioning, why is Annabeth rooted? There are theories. Is it because of Luke? Is it because of Talia? Is it because she questioned the gods? Is it because she left home? We'll hopefully find out next season. Then, when we're at Hades, he really gives oldest brother vibes to me. I'm happy with my part of the cake. I don't want any part in your drama. Just leave me to myself. And for the whole Sally and Poseidon scene, I have no new thoughts except to reiterate that it's freaking heartbreaking and it's such a good scene. It's such a good scene. Now let's talk about quotes. The first one is Grover about the entrance to the underworld. It's either the realm of the dead or someone left a carton of milk in there in the 1990s. Then we have Sally to Percy. Sometimes I have to make choices that you may not understand. And the next one is also from Sally to Percy. This is not a negotiation. The only question is how ugly you're gonna make this before we say goodbye. Then the next one is Annabeth to Percy. I trust your dad. Then I have 2 Hades quotes. The first one is, you give me what you got, I give you what I got. And the next one is, I seldom cahoot. Then we have Percy saying, hold fast, mom, which is, tears my heart out every time. And then we have a lot of Sally Poseidon stuff. The first one is from Sally to Poseidon. I want him to know who he is, before your family tries to tell him who they want him to be. And then we have 2 Poseidon quotes. The first one is, his mother raised him well. And the second one is the closing of this episode. One day when he's ready, when he knows who he is and where he belongs, and fate has revealed to him his true path, on that day, I'll be right by his side. Okay, episode 8. The prophecy comes true, with the theme of conclusions? ? And these are chapters 20 to 22. The Luke and Percy training montage is great and gives us context on how Percy learned to fight. Because when else would he have learned to fight? Yeah, clueless Annabeth is unsettling, because normally she knows all the things. Then Ares saying, gods don't dream. I think the reason Ares says that gods don't dream is because it is something so human, or at least that is what Ares wants to tell himself and the trio. Because dreams symbolize hope, change, and dreaming is so human that he doesn't want to partake in this thing that could make him a literal god, more human. Then the way Percy outwits Ares is by drawing on what he has learned from his friends. He draws on some battle strategy from Annabeth, on sword training and that the gods can't break rules from Luke, and also empathy from Grover. He knows how to goad Ares into fighting him. Then in the cabin we have Electro again, and she was framed as a monster but turned out to be not too bad at the end. Reiterating Sally's statement, not everyone who looks like a monster is a monster. And Electro is just an employee doing what her boss, so Hades, wants her to do. Next thing is about Poseidon. He said he would stand by Percy's side when he needed him the most. And I think in this episode it was 2 times. The first one was he helped him from afar while fighting Ares. He could not interfere personally because Percy demanded single combat. And not only Ares has to abide by these rules, but also Poseidon. So he didn't come and fight the fight for Percy. He just gave him extra bit of ocean power. And the second one is obviously on Olympus, and Poseidon stops Zeus from striking Percy with the Master Bolt. Then I tried my best for analyzing the firework timing. I'm not good at that, but I just wrote down some key points. So when Percy is talking, the fireworks are blue, purple, in those color ranges. When Luke talks, they are all different colors, but mostly green, pink, and yellows. When Percy says the betrayal line from the Oracle, this is the time when the first red firework explodes behind Percy. And the red ones are exploding more and more frequently until Luke says, I didn't think you'd give them to Grover to wear. And every time one of them got a bigger hit in while fighting, a firework in their color exploded. Bluish colors for Percy and red for Luke. Now, portal question. Why is the portal shaped like an H? Does it even have a meaning? Hermes is the god of travelers. In the Lotus Casino he said space and time are easy. So does Backbiter combine the powers of Luke, so son of Hermes, with the ones of Kronos, so space and time? And also, how will they use Backbiter in future seasons? Will they forget about the portal powers like in the book? Or will they just be pure portals? Since Luke said Backbiter opens hidden portals, so where are these portals? And also, why would Luke need the labyrinth if he can make a portal? Maybe the portals are only fit for 1 to 2 people, because when he jumps through it immediately closed after him. Yeah, just in general, the Percy vs. Luke fight is so sad, and you can see the betrayal and sadness in Percy's eyes. And the last thing I want to say is that I love that Percy is even possessive with the Lord of the Titans in this last stream. Now, quotes. First one is from Luke to Percy. It's the opening of this episode. Look, you didn't ask to be a half-blood, but you are one. That makes you a part of something bigger than yourself. Then we have Percy to Ares. I warned you. If you're not careful, you'll find out who I am. The next one is Percy about Zeus. I'm done running from monsters. Then in the cabin, Grover asks Percy, just for clarity, how sure are we you couldn't just explain everything in an email? And we have Percy talking to Luke again. But if we can break the rules, and they can't, shouldn't they be just as afraid of us as we are of them? And then, I think in the same conversation, Luke tells Percy, 2 things you never want to be are small and scary at the same time. Things that are small and scary get squished. Then we have Zeus to Percy about Kronos. Of course he's gathering strength. Of course he's coming back. That's what we do. We snap and plot and strive. Then we have Percy to Zeus. Your family is a mess. They don't support you because they love you. They obey because they're afraid. Then we have Poseidon to Percy. Obedience doesn't come naturally to you, does it? And then the next one was, the sea doesn't like to be restrained. Oh, straight from the books, we love it. Another heartbreaking thing from Percy to Poseidon is, do you ever dream about mom? Then we have Percy to Annabeth. Just be a kid. Then we have Percy to Grover and Annabeth. They're packed. No matter what happens, we meet back here next year. All of us. Right here. Deal? And the last one is, of course, the whole closing monologue. The stories you heard about Greek gods, heroes, and monsters, I'm here to tell you they're real. If you ever feel like you don't fit, like the world doesn't make sense, then you might be a part of our world. So don't give up, because we might need you for the fight ahead. That was all the things I thought about the individual episodes. So some general season overarching stuff. Percy started all these books, which are written by him according to Chalice of the Gods, with something Luke told him. His arch nemesis, his first friend at camp, his mentor, his trainer, his brother figure. He started the books with the "Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood." And that's something Luke told him. I know that making Percy not wet was a production point, and I think it could be explained in the way that they make Percy not wet in future seasons, so to show that his powers are still growing. The same thing is with him understanding horses and being able to talk to them, so that his powers are still developing. Next thing, money. How can Sally afford this cabin? It is really isolated. The septic tank must really smell bad. Or does Poseidon do something to make the cabin cheaper? I don't know. The next part is there's stained glass windows everywhere. Like, they're symbolizing like house of worship, gods, stuff. We have them at the big house, at the cabins, at the cabin in Montauk, at the elevator to Olympus. It's everywhere. The next thing is, how did they clear the kids from being wanted by the FBI? Was it godly intervention? Probably. The Sally and Percy relationship is just so good. It's mother and son goals. And they don't just show the good parts, but also the time Sally struggled as a single mother. Then I have a point about the prophecy. You shall fail to save what matters most in the end. Was that really Sally, or did the prophecy mean something different? In the books, I think it means Percy fails to save Sally from Gabe, but she saves herself. In the series, does it simply mean she was not saved from the underworld by him, but released by Hades? Or are they aiming at something completely different, like maybe failing to save Luke? Speaking of Luke, Percy and Luke are two sides of the same coin, rather than protagonist and antagonist. They both hate the gods for what they have done. They both got abandoned by their fathers, both their mothers got hurt on different levels, but still, they go about it in totally different ways. Then, just some production things I have to nag about. Some of the dark scenes are really dark. Usually I watch things in the evening or at night in a quite dark room or in total darkness, so it doesn't bother me at first, but a few of my rewatches I did during the day were like quite well lit. So I see what everyone was complaining about. I also think it's not just a Percy Jackson problem, it's a general problem in the film industry currently, because there are a lot of things that are quite dark. And the last thing is, we need longer episodes, or more episodes, preferably both. Now I have a few spoilery stuff I want to talk about, so maybe skip ahead about 2 minutes? Yeah, because after that we will do the trivia. So skip ahead about 2.5 minutes. So we have Hestia teasing. First of all there was a person that does not look like a camper in episode 2 in the mess hall. I posted about it on Instagram. It could also be a nymph, but my hopes are that it is Hestia. And the second one, of course, was in the throne room, that there is, instead of a throne, there is a hearth for Hestia. Also, we never get to see the kind of oracle visions from any other prophecy. Why does she appear as Gabe to Percy? And will Rachel have the same things, or does it look different for every oracle? I also like the change of Annabeth seeing the fates, since she and Percy are the ones that will play the biggest part in this foreshadowed death. Next thing is Asphodel. How does the new Asphodel lore affect Hazel? Is she also rooted or not? If she is rooted, maybe she still remembers things because she's a child of Pluto? I don't know. Then, the way Percy and Grover are almost pulled into Tartarus is paralleling the end of Mark of Athena. In both instances, Percy is hanging on with one hand to hold them up, and with the other to secure his best friend. At this moment, his best friend is Grover, but later, Annabeth is not only his best friend, but also his girlfriend. No shade to Grover. I'm pretty sure Percy and Grover are still best friends, but Annabeth is just a smidgen above it because it's his girlfriend. When Poseidon says where he belongs in episode 7, we see Annabeth walking towards Percy. So this is a clear sign that they belong together. Then we have the lore that the last big fight on Olympus led to World War II. What could this fight be about? Maybe the D'Angelos being born, because they're two kids from the same god with the same mortal woman. Oh no, that's not good. Then we have the Percabeth hug in episode 8. The Percabeth hug in episode 8. She pulls him back into the mortal world because she is his tether to the mortal world, especially in The Last Olympian, with the Curse of Achilles, and in House of Hades when we get Dark Percy. And the last thing is, when Percy says that he will meet back here, all of them, they are standing next to Thalia's tree. And even though they don't know it yet, she will also be there next year. Okay, hopefully the people who skipped the spoilery part are back. We will continue with trivia trials. So let's look at the questions of last week. The first one was, the company ILM was one of the responsible visual effects parties on Percy Jackson and the Olympians. What does ILM stand for? ILM stands for Industrial Light and Magic. The second question was, Dior talked about how Clarice and Selena mirror the story of Achilles and Patroclus. Who wrote the retelling of their story named Song of Achilles? The name of the author is Madeline Miller. Now on to today's questions. The first one is, I talked about the panel at the TCA Winter Press Tour. What does TCA stand for? You see, I like my acronyms currently. And the next question is, if you listen closely to today's episode, you know how often I've watched the series and the runtime of the series. So how many minutes in total did I spend watching Percy Jackson and the Olympians? It's just me watching them, we're not going to include the reactions I watched. As always, you can send me your answers on Instagram as a DM or in the notes, or I will post a story on Instagram so you can answer those. Then let's move on to, as always, my favorite part, mythical music. And this time, I'm including a song I only discovered yesterday because I watched the Demigod Diaries Season 1 recap, and they had a really cool song playing in the background, and I did my research and I found this song. And the song is called Love is a Risk by Guest House, and I think it's a really nice song. It's really good, and it's really suitable for these kinds of montages, so I will include that one. And that concludes another adventure with Delphi Dispatches. Thank you, demigods, for joining me on today's quest. Please consider subscribing to the podcast. And if you want to connect with me on Instagram, just follow at Delphi_Dispatches_pod for updates and a fun community. This is Martina, signing off until next time. And remember, the real world is where the monsters are.